Hey, we're in a really, really interesting place. This is called the Bell Caves, and this is in the Shephelah area, which is the lowlands right before you get up into the mountains of Jerusalem. And we just actually left Ashdod, which is one of the 5 Philistine cities. And I say Philistine, and I know you probably, if you know your Old Testament, you're thinking the arch rival or the arch enemy of the nation of Israel, kind of like the Boston Red Sox and the New York Yankees, or the Lakers and the Celtics, or the Patriots and the Buffalo Bills, the rebels and the empire. Really, when you look at the Old Testament, that's what you had with the Philistines and the Israelites. And you know, there's just an amazing story in the Bible. In 1 Samuel chapter 17, there's a story of just a young boy. You know, we looked at a little bit about his calling yesterday, just what God had worked in Samuel's heart as Samuel walked into the house of Jesse and thought that when he looked at Eliab, the firstborn, that there was a Lord's anointed before him. And of course, you remember from yesterday's devotion that God doesn't look on the outside, he looks at the heart. And he doesn't use worldly criteria to determine what is successful or what can be used or can't be used. And right after that story, you know, we're introduced to this crazy situation where the Israelites and the Philistines are literally encamped next to each other. In fact, not far from the very spot in which I'm standing in the valley of Elah. And they'd come to kind of a stalemate, not because their forces were equally matched, but because there was this giant named Goliath. And he was such a fearsome foe to behold that all of Israel were literally shaking in their sandals and in their armor because this giant was more than could be reckoned with. And so you remember Jesse sent David on an errand to visit his brothers to make sure that they were okay there at the front lines of the battle and to bring them some resources, some food and things like that. And David walks in on this situation and he sees this Philistine, this ungodly Philistine, just basically mocking the army of God. And he is so incensed because he loves God and he understands the power of God and the ability of God. And word gets out that this young Israeli boy is really willing to stand against this giant. So he's brought into the tent of Saul, who was the king at the time, and ultimately the king that David would replace, because Saul was man's choice and David was God's choice. And so here he is standing before this king, and he begins to confess his faith in knowing that God would deliver this massive giant, right? I mean, if you were to think about fighting a fight against all odds, it was this little tiny diminutive Israelite boy against, you know, the greatest warrior, you know, in the area at the time. And as he's talking to Saul, what does he do? What does he stand on? How does he know that God is able to do this work in his life? Well, what he says to Saul is just recounting the faithfulness of God in his life. David looks back and he says, "The Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion and from the paw of the bear, he will deliver me from the hand of this Philistine." That's 1 Samuel chapter 17, verse 36. And so just a really good thing to consider here. David says, I know for a fact that not only can God do it, I know God is able to do it, but I know he is also willing to do it because he's done it before in my life. When I was confronted with overwhelming circumstances, when it seemed like the odds were stacked against me, whether it was with the bear or whether it was with the lion, as I was shepherding my sheep, God was faithful and he gave me the victory. You see, David understood that when he stepped onto that field of battle, that it didn't matter the foe that he was facing. It didn't matter if it was one giant or a whole army, because the battle belongs to the Lord. And he stepped forward in victory, knowing that God was going to accomplish a victory again because of his faithfulness in the past. Listen, today, I don't know what giant you might be facing, what obstacle may be in your way, what odds are stacked against you. And I'm sure that there are certainly odds that are stacked against you. There's some challenge that you're dealing with in your life. And I want to remind you of a couple of things. Number one is this, that the God who is faithful in your past is the same God who will be faithful in your present. The past faithfulness of God speaks prophetically about his future faithfulness in your life. And so you can step forward confidently on that field of battle, whether you're dealing with temptation or maybe there's a ministry opportunity that's before you. Maybe God has given you potentially an open door to share the gospel with somebody or some situation with business, whatever it may be. Know today that God is the one who's able to bring you victory. And then in addition to that, this victory he brings in your present is going to be the foundation that you stand on for the victory that he is going to accomplish in your future. So today I want to encourage you just to trust in the Lord, be like David did, remember what God has done in the past, walk confidently in that today in your present, because God is the one who brings you the victory. God bless you.